I'm continuing the Unit 7 review with looking at 7.2 and 7.3, just graphing sine and cosine. So our first example we did on the last video, we're going to jump into the second one. So again, amplitude is the absolute value of the number in front. Phase shift. Now, this is not a phase shift. It's not in the parentheses with the x. So this is saying take cosine of x, then subtract 2. This was saying take x and add pi fourths, then take sine of it. So that's the difference there. So x equals 0 because that's the only thing that's inside. So there's really not a phase shift. Mean line. Is -2. That means that I'm shifting this down to the period is 2 pi divided by 1 because there's technically a 1 in front of the x. And then the x scale is to take the period and divide it by 4. Well, the period's the same as the one before it, so we're going to be stepping by pi halves, and this is what a cosine function looks like. Okay. So on our graph, what we're going to do is I'm going to scale this a little bit differently since we're not working with pi fourths. So I'm just going to say pi halves, or 2 pi, pi. So every mark on my graph is now pi halves. And the baby's waking up. Okay, you're going to hear Sesame Street probably in the background. It's keeping Mary entertained. So we're doing a cosine graph. And the only kind of transformation off of our parent function is this right here. So that's going to move everything down 2. So our mean line, instead of being on the x-axis, is being shifted down 2. So that's the middle. Now, when the amplitude is 1, that's not talking about the distance from the x-axis. It's talking about from the midline. So the maximum value is going to be -1, and the minimum value is going to be -3. So cosine starts at the top, so the maximum value, and then each step, which is our pi halves, in this case, it's going to move. So this one's going to be the middle, and then at the lowest, middle, highest. And so that would be continuing that way as well. And then for the domain, that doesn't change. It's still all real numbers. The range, this was moved in a vertical direction, and so everything gets moved down 2. So this one gets moved down 2. It's -3 to -1. And then that's that graph. The other one that I want to look at is over here. So we have y equals 3 sine of x. So same process, the amplitude is take the absolute value of 3, and then phase shift, there isn't one because you just set that equal to 0. mean line, technically you could add +0 to this. And then the period, there's just a 1 in front of the x. So it's 2 pi divided by 1, which is just 2 pi. And that means our x scale is going to be the same. It's just that pi halves. And then sine does this. Middle, top, middle, bottom, middle. So all that's changing is the amplitude on this one. So I'm going to need 3 above the mean line and 3 below the mean line. So now the maximum is going to be 3, minimum is going to be -3. And because it's sine, sine starts in the middle. Step up, step middle, step down, step middle. Domain is all real numbers still. Range is from -3 to 3. So those are some examples. We're going to do more. But this one, the only transformation was a phase shift, a vertical shift, so the mean line moved, and the amplitude changed. I do want to make a note on this one. Let's kind of scoot this up. Let's see if I can get a little bit in there. If this had been a negative, how that would change, you still have 3 and -3 as maximum values. The period is still 2 pi. So we're still stepping by pi halves. The difference is it's reflected across the x-axis. So now instead of going up, because of this negative, we'd go down. So something like that. So cosine, if cosine was flipped, it would just start at the lowest. So that's how a negative would change. Okay, we'll do 3 more examples on the next video.